bro. But let's get into some mores. Let's get into some more Moors, in Morocco, bro. I actually been getting interested in just researching, Moors, because the Moors were is they're Muslim. The first nation was the Morocco was the first nation to recognize U.S. independence in 1977. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship 1786 between U.S. and Morocco. You know, uh, I've been just doing my research on just the Moors and just the research they don't tell us about the Moors in school and these different things. Like, I think you have to go through that rabbit hole to really know the true history of America and knowing that it was black people here before there was white people, bro. I think that's one of the most things we have to realize, that they don't tell us that we taught them a lot of shit, and not a lot of shit, damn near everything. But let's get into this, bro. Let's get into this video right here.
Moors were African men who went into Europe around 711 AD, and they really civilized Europe because Europe was going through a dark age. Europe was really struggling because after the Vandals had basically destroyed Rome, everything was backwards over there. So the Moors went in and they ushered in the Renaissance era. They brought in science, mathematics, astrology. They brought all of this into Europe.
They are bringing in hot and cold running water. They are bringing in concepts of what we call a cosmopolitan city. They are lighting the streets by lamps. In Cordova, they built an entire city where the streets for miles you could walk with lamps that lit the street at night. And they had raised sidewalks where people could walk. The kings and queens of Europe lived in barns. Nobody wants to admit that. But they lived in barns. They lived with the animals. And another thing that the Africans brought in was that they said, you cannot let your chicken run around in your house, and then cows got to go outside. So they created what's called corrals. And corral is an Ethiopian word. It's the K-R-A-L sound. Corral, which is where they would put their animals after they domesticated them. Europeans let them animals run all up and down. This is where the German measles come from. This is where chickenpox come from. Because Europeans did not have a place for their animals. They just ran all up inside their places. And they would carry, as they would get illnesses and sicknesses, they did not bathe. So therefore, they had no soap. They had no disinfectant, didn't have alcohol. So that this type of style of living brought illness. When the Moors came in, they wrapped all that up along with bringing medicine. What you have happening is that these Gothic kingdoms are going to they're going to sack the Roman Empire. And after they sack the Roman Empire, they're going to take this area over for a while. And then the Moors are going to come in and they're going to push those Visigoths out. And they're going to push them more north, and they're going to chase them out of the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula. And that's where the Moors are going to inhabit from 710 until 1492, January 2nd to be exact, when the last great king, Boabdil, was chased out of Granada.
The term Moor started to become interchangeable with the term black because it was basically the same thing. But when the slave trade started, they tried to objectify black people, Moorish people. So they would use the term interchangeably, and they would just switch on to calling people black. But if you look at a lot of old documents, there's even slave ships called Blackamoor. If you look at slave records, there was even a boxer out of Virginia who was very popular in the early 1800s named Tom Molyneux, and his nickname was the Moor. So that name was definitely used interchangeably with black or Negro at.
I think everybody need to go do their research just on the Moors, just the history of the Moors, and just some shit they didn't teach us. They didn't teach us in school that they taught did this and that, bro. They was creating these diseases. They didn't know how to carry themselves or how to proper hygiene and different things like that. And I think that's insane. I think that's just inferiority complex. Like, they just don't want to tell us the truth. They want to make it seem like they was just always right, and this and that. They had it all figured out, bro. They didn't have this shit figured out, bro. We taught them, and they took over what we taught them, bro. Went to war with us, bro, after we taught them, bro. You know what I'm saying? That's a crazy thing to realize, but it is what it is, bro. It is what it is at this point, bro. But let's get into this John Horse, another story they never tell us, bro. John Horse and the Seminole Wars, bro. John Horse was a black Seminole leader. He fought in the Seminole Wars, 1816 to the 1858. Later and he later led black Seminoles to Mexico to escape slavery, secure land from Mexican government. It's one of the stories that should be told. There's a lot of stories that should be told that we don't tell, bro. There's so many stories that, bro, I could just make a video every. I'm gonna start do more content like this next week. I'm gonna give y'all some more stories. Black History Month. So I'm trying to give y'all some more stories. I'm gonna start just even be more consistent with that, just telling the story that I learned. But John Horse is one of the ones, the Seminole Wars, and that we really freed ourselves, and they never tell us these things. But let's get into this right here.
Welcomed. And so from George Washington's administration on, there was questions of what do we do about the problem of the Florida Everglades. In 1818, this was James Monroe's administration, General Andrew Jackson actually moved into Florida, invaded it, not authorized to do so. He was actually pursuing justice against those who'd attacked Fort Scott in Georgia, but he did it anyway. He went into Florida and claimed it for the United States. When he seized the peninsula, he took the opportunity to execute some of the people who opposed him, and also to clean out some of the areas of former slaves and Seminoles, because he felt that this would make it better for annexation. The United States then soon actually bought Florida from the Spanish. When Jackson became president, he decided to make sure that the Black Seminole communities were moved out by force. So he pursued this in his policy, his larger policy of Indian removal. This led to the Second Seminole War, which was 1835 to 1842, and became the largest and costliest of the so-called Indian Wars. Because the two communities were tied together, that is, the former slaves and the Seminoles, when the Seminoles were attacked in the Seminole War, this led to an uprising of the former slaves. In April of 1836, Black Seminoles and their Indian allies moved together to create what was the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history. This wasn't just a matter of runaway slaves. More than 385 plantation slaves ran away from their masters and joined the Black Seminoles, essentially in laying waste to the Florida sugar mills, which were some of the most valuable plantations in the whole continent. One Seminole leader at the time was the leader Osceola, who is justly remembered by history. Another leader who rose up at this time was John Horse, who was ethnically a Black Seminole, and who would ultimately lead his people on a long and trying exodus for their freedom. In 1838, John Horse and the Black Seminoles agreed to stop fighting the U.S. government in exchange for moving to what was then considered to be Indian Territory, which is now today the state of Oklahoma, and for legal recognition of their freedom. So despite the fact many of them were runaway slaves, they would have the opportunity to start over again as free individuals. Once they moved from the Everglades,
we freed ourselves. We fought to get freed, bro. The Trail of Tears. I know I got ancestors that come from that shit. That's we all connected. We don't even realize that these are our ancestors, nigga. These are our ancestors that fought. They don't teach us about the John Horse shit. They barely teach us about the Malcolm X. You gotta go learn about the Malcolm X, bro. They don't give you the full. You gotta go read about the Malcolm X. We gotta go read about the Louis Farrakhan's. We gotta go read about, these different people, but there's so many different leaders that have fought. This is nothing new under the sun. That's why they keep having to kill us. They keep having to enslave us. They keep having to jail us. They do anything to keep us from rebelling. They keep anything to keep the slave happy, bro. How to Make a Slave. You have to read that shit. That's a good book to read, bro. I have it in there, bro. How to Make a Slave. By what's his name? Not How to Make a Slave. I'll go. We'll talk about that later. I don't want to give y'all the wrong book, bro. I can't remember what the name was, bro. But it's like it's just. We still living in this time and the age. It's a new form of it, bro. It's a new form of it. Like even Abraham Lincoln, bro. Abraham Lincoln never wanted to free us, bro. Abraham Lincoln ain't never want to free us from all that shit, bro. He wrote to Horace Greeley, bro, in 1862. Fact. This is a fact. You can look this shit up. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. His priority was preserving the Union. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't about slavery. He was down. He felt bad for us. He was on our side. You know what I'm saying? It's just not history. They tell us the certain pieces and parts and pieces of history. They don't tell us this part that if he could have free, if he didn't have to free any of these slaves and he could have saved the Union, he would have did that shit. They don't tell us this shit because they scared to tell us this shit. They don't want to tell us no truth. They gotta give us bits and pieces, nigga. That's what they do. You gotta be able to see through that shit too. Your next breakthrough might be one book away. I've partnered with Amazon to create an influencer storefront with all self-improvement books that help me reprogram my mind, and they can help you change how you think, move, and see this reality. All of these books and many more help me reprogram my mindset and help me make this content that I make for y'all weekly. It helped me become way more aware and align wealth with well-being. Click the link so you can reprogram your mind and create your dream reality. Later, guys. Let's get back to the video.